Last time, I outlined the winners and losers to the normalisation of relations between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. So now I want to examine some of the reaction to this announcement and discuss something that has been niggling me since it happened. Here's the rub. Have you noticed that the further left an organisation is, the less enthusiastic about the news it has been? Gulf states such as Oman and Bahrain were congratulatory of the announcement, and following the lead of the UAE, it appears that there could be a domino effect from that part of the world. That's good news. But you might have thought that the lovies on the left would have been deliriously happy with this story of worldwide significance. You might have thought that, but it didn't seem to get them all that wound up. Firstly, the United Nations blabbered on how it hopes this will, quote, create an opportunity for Israeli and Palestinian leaders to re-engage in meaningful negotiations that will realise a two-state solution. One day the UN will grow some eyes and ears. Germany and Spain cautiously welcomed the deal. Boris Johnson praised it, and France, and here we start the downward slide, welcomed Israel's decision to suspend its planned annexation of areas of the occupied West Bank. Of course they would. The left applaud this momentous development in the Middle East because it would be churlish not to, but it is often only a warm endorsement. They accept it begrudgingly, but then have to spin it so that it better fits their narrative in some way. And the best way to do this is to talk about the suspension of the proposed extension of Israeli rule over Judea and Samaria. That way, it becomes a win. So the win is not the peace that may break out between Israel and the Gulf states and the sidelining of Iran, currently the greatest threat to the modern world. The win is all about blocking what happens in the West Bank. Why is this so? Well, my theory is that part of the reason is because Bibi Netanyahu orchestrated it. The left hate him like they hate Donald Trump, and whatever he does, however good it may be, it can't possibly be accepted without looking for an angle to vilify him. Whilst the centre-right commentators have rushed to strongly endorse the Israel UAE announcement, with no strings attached, as you move left, the excitement wanes in favour of the Palestinians and the West Bank angle. Take, for example, J Street, which astonishingly said that there was not much substance to the deal and that it is mostly a PR boost for the three leaders involved. But the costs will be borne by the one party not involved in the arrangement, the Palestinians. What? The Australian arm of the New Israel Fund, that self-congratulating but mislabelled organisation which supports Israel's enemies, parroted exactly what J Street said. The NIF offered backhanded support to the deal, but also said that while it welcomes news that the Netanyahu government is retreating from plans to carry out annexation of the West Bank, his statement that he still remains committed to carrying out the plan is a cause for concern. Of our local organisations, Alex Rivchin of the Executive Council of the Australian Jury did the right thing and warmly welcomed the deal. Our state-based organisations didn't have much to say. Oh well, I suppose they have their hands full with much more important social justice issues to deal with. The Murdoch press gave the issue good coverage, but the ABC followed the leftist formula by leading their story with a plan to halt annexation of parts of the West Bank. So that was the best that any of the left-wing groups could offer? No mention of increased trade, tourism or cultural exchanges? Nothing about the scaling down of hostilities between formerly implacable enemies? But for pure unadulterated negativity, you can't go past the Imams of Australia. The Australian National Imams Council sprung out of the blocks by issuing a media statement which, in its wording, gave a lot away. Have a look for it on the AJA Facebook page. They referred to, quote, the occupying forces of Israel and Arab countries, and called for a sovereign Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital, but with a tone that implies that Israel has no right to exist as a Jewish state. They completely avoided mentioning any of the benefits that peace between Israel and the Gulf states will bring, as if it was all completely irrelevant. And as usual, it is only the Australian Jewish Association that has the nerve to stand up and call out this snide bigotry towards Israel and, by extension, the Jewish world. No doubt all our other communal organisations will be rushing off to arrange an interfaith dinner, but avoiding, quote, the difficult subjects. The announcement that Israel and the UAE will normalise relations is a game changer. But in the world of wokeness, nothing is ever good unless it provides an opportunity for the narcissistic, moralising left to scream their left-wing views at people who really don't want to hear them. This is Alan Friedman for the Australian Jewish Association.